the expectation is the expectations for term 5 and what to expect, as well as for the USMLE step 1, our experience with term 5, because I really want to emphasize that term 5 is extremely different than terms 1 through 4. They all each have their own little characteristics, but term 5 is its own beast in itself. Tam and Yo, you want anything to add?
Not at the moment. I will as we go on.
All right. So if you want to do the next screen for me. So as far as the expectations, you're going to hear different things from the dean of students, the administrators, as well as the professors at SGU. Some of the things that they told us once we passed term 5 and the BSFCR was that for some reason, whether it's because the USMLE step 1 has changed the pass fail, so our expectations have changed, as well as how much we need to study for the USMLE step 1. But for some reason, they're experiencing a higher fail rate at SGU. They kind of said this is the highest fail rate in the history of SGU. And there's a lot of reasons behind that they have kind of told us. I think one of the reasons is the curriculum. It doesn't exactly match the step 1. Other reasons are, the mentality, we don't have to prepare as hard leading up to the step 1. And personally, I feel like for me, they give us a deadline of basically 6 weeks to prepare for our class specifically. That 6-week deadline kind of really pushed us to take the step 1 when a lot of us were not ready. So that's personally my experience. So that's one of the expectations going in. The next thing I just want to talk about is you're going to be tested in term 5, that content that was never even discussed in lectures, content that was never discussed in 2 years of being at SGU, but it's content that is in first aid and content that are in other resources that we're going to talk about. And then the final thing is, really, you're going to feel like a fish out of water when you enter term 5. It doesn't matter if you're student government, if you're honors, both. I've seen both not do well in term 5. People have had to repeat the BSFCR. People have had to repeat term 5. It's really just a different term in itself. So just keep that in your mind, like, oh, you've been getting 95s for all the exams. It's very different when you step into term 5. They really expect you to have a different kind of foundation. So we're going to talk about that, but seriously, it's 100% manageable. Everything's 100%, able to succeed and get through. Like, honestly, if I can do it, and I'm someone who scored poorly on the MCAT, I'm someone who did well in college, but not amazing. I'm someone who never did well in my first year at SGU, but I came here and I did things differently. And for some reason, I just found the key to doing well in term 5. And I just want to share with you guys. Tam and Yo, you have anything to add?
Yeah, go ahead, Tam.
No, you go ahead.
I was just gonna say, yeah, I agree with pretty much what everything Jonathan was saying. I was a little distracted trying to figure out the whole mute situation, so thank you to Julia, who actually ended up telling me. But pretty much what Jonathan said, like throughout my 2 years at SGU, I've obviously gotten better with studying and have been doing much better in school. But term 5 was definitely like something that, like, when I first took the first BSCE, like I was in for a shock with the CRS exam. Like, I left that exam thinking like, wow, this is like the worst exam I've ever taken in my life. The curve did help, but again, you're gonna feel like in term 5 that everything you've ever learned for that first exam was just like out the window for your brain. But if you sort of stay on top of things and like try and keep the advice that all 3 of us have, we all have different study styles and learning styles. So when we're talking, if you see something that you relate to, and then try and incorporate it and see if it helps you, that would be great. But I think the first thing too with the first exam, the BSCE one, so not the first exam, we'll talk about it, but CRS, which is the CPRH, it's CPRH, sorry, CRS is term 4. The CPRH exam, like that's going to be sort of the exam that's going to tell you how you need to study for the rest of them. And then we're going to try and help you guys with that. But I hope that was helpful. I don't know if I have anything else because I was distracted, but yeah.
Yeah, I agree with everything you both said. Yeah, that first CPRH exam was probably my worst exam ever at SGU, but you can come back from it. It's just very different. There's a lot of material covered on it from term 1 to term 4 and term 5, because there's going to be new stuff you're going to be learning. Not a lot of new stuff, but new enough. But you got this. But we'll go through everything. We'll talk about our favorite resources and how we managed to pass this term.
So starting off with the timeline of term 5, so you're going to have a few different modules, but really what I want you to keep in mind is the MNI module is really like term 4 part 2. There's about 400 plus drugs you really need to memorize and their mechanism of action for the exam. So just keep that in mind. It's definitely difficult, but they give you a lot of time to really go through. It's a very long module, but I really don't count that as term 5. Once you get past the MNI module, then the fun really begins. You get access to the USMLE RX and UWorld. And USMLE RX is really that really a big resource for SGU exams in the sense that they're going to give you quizzes on there. Quizzes of about, I don't know, 50, 100 questions, I can't remember. And some of those questions will be on the exam, or they'll reword the question or use the same kind of content to really test you. So that was really important. UWorld is really for the USMLE step 1. It doesn't really help you with SGU exams at all. So just keep that in mind when you get access to it. And then once you get through term 5, you do the BSF-CR. Something I really want to point out is if you pass term 5, but you fail the BSF-CR, you do not have to retake term 5. You will be given the option to retake the BSF-CR in about 6 weeks after the test date. So just keep that in mind. You don't have to really pass both to, move on, but you do have to pass the BSF-CR to take step 1. But just keep in mind that a lot of our class made through term 5, but then didn't pass the BSF-CR, like a good amount. I'd say probably like a third, if I'm honest with you. And so they're retaking it probably, I think, this week or last week. So just keep that in mind. We'll talk about the BSF-CR later, but just this is mainly the timeline. I really want to point out too that there is a few exams in there and they're really cumulative. So in term 4, you're going to do 3 modules, right? You're gonna have 3 systems in each exam. In term 5, it's 4 systems in each exam. And so, they're really stepping up. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the exams in a second, but really wanted to point out the CPRH exam is by far the hardest exam in SGU that I've ever taken. I literally walked out of that exam and I said, I failed. I'm going to have to go to the island next term. I'm going to have to retake term 5. It ended up being one of my best exams at SGU because of the curve. Like it was probably a 10% curve. It was insane. So just keep that in mind, like walking out of the exam, it may not be how you actually did because the exams are extremely difficult. Tam, you got anything to add?
I was going to add that in addition to these 2, you do also get a prescription for or subscription for pass test, which I did pass test during term 5 for certain exams. It was kind of helpful, but it was really confusing. I wouldn't say it's the best question source to do. I would stick with USMLE RX. The quizzes are really good. You definitely want to go through those. Pass test was okay. Some were really easy. Some were really hard. Yeah, pass test, it wasn't the best. But yeah, you do also get access to that. But that's all I wanted to mention here. Oh, and yeah, CPRH was also my worst exam. I'm blessed for the curve that it brought me up, and it was still my worst. But I want to say it gets better after that, but depends on the person. That's all I got right now.
Yo, do you want anything to add?
I mean, yeah, it's sort of what you guys were pretty much saying. In regards to CPRH, I already expressed my grievances with CPRH. Again, worst exam at SGU. Left it crying. I think I was on the phone with Tam for an hour while I was hiking after it because I was like, this is like the most awful thing that's ever happened. There was a lot of debating that day. But I mean, at the end, the curve did really help. You will get decent curves on the exams. I don't know, like our term throughout the 2 years, like we stopped getting curves after term 1, and then out of nowhere we got like 1 curve in term 4, and then in term 5 for each BSc there was a curve. It went from like 5% to like ranging to 10%, but there were curves. So you will get curves on these exams. Now, do you want to be dependent on them? No. But if you leave an exam feeling like, oh, like this was the most awful thing ever, most likely everyone else also felt like that. So don't freak out until the next exam. Then if it wasn't what you wanted, some people have different expectations of themselves, and that's understandable. But again, with term 5, it's sort of like you just want to pass. I know some people want honors, and the term 5 is sort of what something you just want to pass. You know, like you just take what you did from CPRH and try to learn from it. Like Jonathan said, USMLE RX, they give you quizzes, and I'm going to tell you, I think we're going to talk about this a little bit later, so I'm just going to make a quick statement about it. I pretty much use those quizzes to guide my studying because I didn't really pay attention to lectures. So we'll talk about that later, and then everyone else did their own thing to study for these exams. So again, whatever works best for you guys, but those quizzes are like a must do. Do not just wait till the end, because they have a submission date for the end of the term to just submit them all. You have to do 50% of them. Don't do that. Like actually take these quizzes seriously and actually use them to incorporate into your studying. Because I'm telling, like the lectures are just gonna feel like you're learning nothing from them. And most of the BSCs don't even test specifically from term 5 lectures. There's maybe like 5 questions on each exam from the lectures, which I learned, and that's why I stopped paying attention to them. They're gonna be really from the past 2 years. And the RX quizzes are designed to be incorporative of the past 2 years, which is why you really need to do them. We'll talk about UWorld a little bit later. I do have like some I'm a little upset with myself for neglecting UWorld during term 5, so I'm going to really harp on you guys with a little bit of UWorld during term 5. But UWorld is going to be mainly for step prep, not really for BSCE preps. So yeah, we'll talk about that later. I don't want to take up too much time on this slide.
Okay, so this is really the really big point I want to hone in on. Again, you're going to be tested on content. Like I would say 40% of the content is coming from lectures, whereas the other terms, you would maybe get like 70, 80% plus on an exam. No, that is not the case here. They are literally testing you on content that was never taught at SGU, that was only discussed in a handful of resources. One of them being first aid. Obviously, you should have first aid. That should be your Bible. When you go through, like they will give you a lecture on endocrinology. They'll talk about like the pituitary. You should go into Boards and Beyond. This is the single best resource that will save you from passing. And you should watch every single video on endocrinology, even if they haven't talked about the pancreas, even if they haven't talked about the adrenal glands, because I promise you, you will get mad questions on all of that stuff. And remember, this is 4 systems per exam. So you really, on day 1 that they mention it, go into Boards and Beyond, do the questions and the quizzes. Obviously, after you watch the videos as well, because those quizzes, I've seen some of those questions as clickers, and I've seen some of them worded differently in exams as well. Like Boards and Beyond is a very cumulative resource for the content that's discussed at SGU. And what I've noticed is some of the videos from Boards and Beyond, the outline was really, really similar to SGU's lectures. So that single-handedly is amazing. The drugs for MNI, Sketchy was amazing for those. Sketchy was really, really important. RX quizzes, you have to do those when they give you them. Like you have to do it for that week. Obviously review that week's content, do the RX quizzes. If you're scoring poorly, look at the content you're doing wrong, watch the Boards and Beyond videos. And I'm not talking about the Boards and Beyond videos that you get that's been passed around from the Excel files. I'm talking like a legit subscription, because there's way more videos in that subscription and they've been redone from previous years where people like bootleg those videos. It is so golden. Like that resource alone was how I got a B in term 5. Amazing. Obviously Sketchy, RX quizzes, first aid, definitely first aid. It really follows Boards and Beyond as well. So you can write notes in your first aid book as you're doing the Boards and Beyond video. Personally, what I did was I made note cards. They're kind of like bigger note cards, and I used the front and back, and I did 1 note card for each video, and I filled up that note card because there was so much content from each Boards and Beyond video. I would also watch the videos like 2-3 times. So if I went over something like immunodeficiencies, I guarantee you I will have to watch that video 2 more times, because that is one of the most difficult videos to watch on Boards and Beyond, but it's also the most difficult content. But it really puts it in an organized way. But if you take anything out of this video, is Boards and Beyond is one of the biggest things you can do to pass term 5. And I never used it before in any of the other terms. Because to be honest with you, the lectures just didn't do enough to really talk about what was even in the exams. And then when we did have lectures, the professors, unfortunately, were very difficult to understand, and they were very not super organized as Boards and Beyond, and the content just really wasn't explained as well. So that was a really important fact. Also, Pathoma, I've been using Pathoma again recently for step 1 studying. It's decent as well, but really, what's on the slide is really your key. Anything you all want to add?
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I also didn't start using Boards and Beyond until term 5, because during like term 1, term 2, watching videos was really boring for me. But what I do now is I'll watch Boards and Beyond, and I'll look for it in first aid, and I'll take notes and highlight actively. So I'm listening, I'm seeing it, and I'm writing it. And that's been helping me a lot. I don't necessarily rewatch videos. For some reason, I've never liked to do that. But I think the fact that I can take notes in my first aid and I can just go back and look at it real quick, that has been super helpful for me. But yeah, the quizzes for Boards and Beyond after every single video are really awesome. I really like them. They really hit on the important parts of those videos that Dr. Ryan wanted you to like really pick up on. Loved them. Definitely love Boards and Beyond. RX quizzes, we've talked about how much we love those. They're really great. If you look at the back of first aid, they have like a ranking list of what is the best source to use. UWorld and USMLE RX are the top 2. So I would definitely take that over past test. Sketchy, loved it for farm, loved it for all of the SSRIs, super funny. Also all the antibiotics. I still remember antibiotics really well, all because of Sketchy Farm. Also, I really love Sketchy for micro. Those are my 2 favorite things for Sketchy. Some of the pathologies are okay. I tried watching Sketchy Biochem, also really good, but I really just like it for farm and micro. Another thing that I did is I attended Dr. Oki pathology review sessions. He was a former pathology professor with SGU. He's really awesome. He hits everything important, and he takes UWorld questions for fun, just to see like, what are they testing these days? And as I just finished UWorld, my first pass, I'm starting on the second one, and I'm doing a lot of NBMEs, but there are a lot of questions I get, and I remember him talking about it and mentioning it, and I'll go back to my notes and I'm like, oh, he said it, it's right here. But yeah, I loved him. He has a new email. There was someone who mentioned to me earlier that the email that they emailed him on didn't work, but this is his new one. And then of course, annotate first aid. So that kind of goes with the videos. And then I've been using Anki since term 1. I've been using the MS12 SGU Anki deck. Also, it has Zonki in the deck. If anyone wants a link to that, I can definitely send it. And that has been amazing because even through all of the terms, when we were like on a certain module, I would see cards that weren't tested on an SGU exam, but I still saw it. So now when I'm doing UWorld and also in term 5, I'm like, oh, I already saw this like a year ago. I didn't really know what it was until now, but I already had it preset in my mind that it exists somewhere. So that has been super helpful. You can start Anki in term 5. I've had a few people, like friends, did that and it helped them out a lot. But yeah, those were my favorite resources. How many new cards a day do I do? So it depends. So I would set them up by week. And then so you have to start backwards when you set it up. If anyone needs help setting up Anki, I'm also here to help. So I would look at the total number of cards and I would divide it by how many days were like between each module. And then, so there was like, for one exam, it recommended I do like 50 Anki cards a day, like new ones. I just bumped it up to 100, 110. And then, so, oh, also, I forgot why I didn't mention this, but I would Okay, so I'd look at the total number of cards for that module, and then I would look at the days in between the module we just finished and the one we're about to start. But you also want to finish that Anki deck a week before the exam. So you're reviewing and not doing new cards. So I take that into account as well. So I'd subtract 7 days and then divide by that number. And that's what I did. So for term 5, most of the new cards you're going to do like maybe 50. But I always did more because then I finished sooner and then I would review more. I also just got a question if I kept up with Anki throughout the terms. So unfortunately, after term 1, I did not do that until the beginning of term 5. So, but the beginning of term 5, I had like 8,000 cards left over from term 1, 2, 3, and I was keeping up with 4 from term 4 to term 5. So because there's less cards to kind of go over in the term 5 decks on this SGU deck, I started doing the older cards, and that actually helped me a lot on term 5 exam as well, because they're using that material to give you questions on the exams. So first I already did term 4 and term 3, and then I went to term 2. So I'd go through that. So I would go through the cards that go with that module, like CPRH. I did term 1, CPR 1 and 2 cards, and then respiratory and stuff like that. And then when we got to GOER, I did term 2 DM and ER. So now I'm still keeping up with all of them. I've got it down to 400 and something a day. But if you're not keeping up with them now, I would start soon because it has been incredibly helpful for me. But that's all I have to ask. If anybody has any questions, please let me know.
The one thing, because I think we're talking about lectures on the next slide, so I'm just going to keep my part on this short. So one thing, me, Tam, and Jonathan's like study styles have always been different from each other. Like Tam loves to do Anki, Jonathan loves like Pathoma, Sketchy, all of that stuff. I always liked Amboss just because Amboss felt like a medical dictionary. You put anything in it and it just pops up and you just read about it. And I don't know, reading about it and like sort of seeing the videos they had always helped me. So I always liked Amboss if anyone has Amboss. I never got the questions, so I only have the free whatever they give you every month. But the one thing that did connect us all in term 5 was Boards and Beyond. So I know we're like harping on Boards and Beyond, and but it really did help, especially like the way I approached Boards and Beyond in terms of studying was Jonathan did the whole like, you know, like going to lectures saying they're talking about the adrenal gland today. So he watched every video on the adrenal gland. I personally, though, how I did it, because you're gonna find out I didn't really pay attention to lectures. Like I was a huge lecture person, like from term 1 to term 4. Like I would sit there and I would understand the lectures, like all that stuff. Term 5, the lectures for BSCE, like not for M&I. I paid attention to all lectures in M&I, but onwards from that, like CPRH and onwards, those lectures felt so like I wasn't learning for anything from them. The professors, you know, like I wasn't really learning anything from them. It just didn't feel like it made sense to me. So I stopped really going to, like, I went to class, but I didn't really pay attention, to get my drift. So I learned for these exams based on the RX quizzes, I would do the quizzes as a learning tool. Like I wouldn't do it to test myself. I would go through them and I would be like, okay, what do I remember? Like when I was on renal, I'd be like, okay, I'm doing the renal quiz. Like, what do I remember about this question? If I got it wrong, I would read the explanation. And if I didn't really understand the explanation, I would go on Boards and Beyond and watch whatever video they had on that, you know? So I was sort of like supplementing Boards and Beyond, but really using the quizzes to learn from it. Because that was how my learning style really worked for me in term 5. I found out after CPRH, so it really helped me out. I was never a fan of Sketchy, so I really had nothing to say about Sketchy. I just don't learn from it. I went to Dark Yoki in term 4, but I didn't continue in term 5 just because, again, I was a little tired. I just wanted to do the RX quizzes. And I'm not really a first aid person. I tried annotating it, as Tam can tell you. I have tried. First aid it just seems like a lot of shorthand words to help you memorize something, but I don't know. I've always been, I need to read like a long explanation that walks throughout the process. And honestly, I felt like the RX quizzes, the explanations they gave, and especially for UWorld, like the explanations they give really make sense. And sometimes when they supplement videos and when you watch Boards and Beyond, like it really stuck in my head. So if you're a conceptual person, not really a memorization person, maybe this method of studying might help you. I mean, am I still struggling with some micro and farm stuff? Obviously. But again, like the more questions you do, the more the micro and farm is eventually going to stick. So that's why I suggest this kind of studying. But all in all, in terms of resources, we all recommend Boards and Beyond just because like it really did help us all. And if you, because I know this happened to me, I started Boards and Beyond term 1 for the cardio exam, I think. And I was like, this is awful. Like, I don't understand this guy. So I never wanted to touch him again. But then Jonathan started watching him again in term 5, and he's like, no, you gotta check him out. I don't know what's wrong with you in term 1, but you have to check him out. I was like, fine, I'll look at the Boards and Beyond video. And now it started to make sense because it felt like, because I learned it, now he was saying it in a way that actually made it stick more in my head. So if you did touch Boards and Beyond, you're like, this isn't really my thing, because I know a lot of people, try it again, because maybe with all the information you've learned, he'll actually make sense this time. I don't know, I'm just putting that out there. But yeah, that's really all I have to say in terms of resources.
Yeah, definitely agree. In the beginning, it's very much growing pains with Boards and Beyond. You're like, I don't know about this. I remember using in term 1. I hated it. I was like, this is stupid, because I was using the Excel document that went around. And so it would just be, the top video would be like a video that's like halfway through the module. And I'd be like, I don't even understand what's going on. So I never really used it, or I was like, there's no way I have to memorize all this. Boy, was I wrong. 100% recommend it. Amazing resource. Growing pains in the beginning, but you'll get used to it for sure. All right. Yeah, lectures. There's a lot to say about this. I don't know if it was because of the pandemic. I really don't. Keep in mind that all 3 of us did SGU the full 2 years online. There are some perks of doing it and a lot of cons. Perks, saved a lot of money. Cons, we weren't there for in-person lectures, but I will tell you, literally term 5 lectures, I've never seen lectures so bad in my life. Maybe they'll change it for your class. We wrote incredibly long reviews about term 5. There is basically 3 lecturers the entire term, and it's very unfortunate because it was very difficult to understand them, or the ones we could understand, it was just extremely complicated, and it just seemed like they couldn't fit all the information into one lecture. What I will say is that do not fall behind in term 5, because unlike term 4, you cannot catch up, because you're literally being tested on a system every week, and then you have an exam. So what I'll say is, just to reiterate what I said, you go over endocrine, you go over anything, you watch the videos for Boards and Beyond, you make note cards, you do the RX quizzes, as well as any practice questions that they upload, which I don't think they uploaded really any practice questions for term 5, because they expected you to do the RX quizzes. The RX quizzes, I think I scored like 50 something percent on, which is okay, because when you read the information and the explanation, you learned a lot and you basically memorized it. I mean, the one thing about RX quizzes is once you like read it once, I felt like I knew and I wasn't gonna miss that question again. So yeah, lectures, I recommend, whereas in term 4, you had to do the lectures 4 times, 3 times even passes to really get it down. I would say twice max. And I would do it once to pre-read and then once before the exam. They were really bad. Yeah, it was, there's so much I could say. It's so bad. I'm sorry, guys. So please watch the Words and Beyond video. They are golden. They are what the lectures should have been. And I can explain how I did the note cards. So what I would do is, for instance, we talked about something in SGU in the lectures. Guarantee you Boards and Beyond had that exact same video, made a note card of that video, did the quiz. And for the note card, I really just titled the video and put subtopics. Really, everyone does it differently. You kind of have to figure out how you like to do it. But for me, even to this day, I'm still looking back at those note cards I made in term 5 because they are so relevant for step 1. I will admit, term 5 will somewhat prepare you for step 1, but it's unfortunate how difficult the lectures are and the exams are. So if you get it down with the first exam, not MNI, once you start after MNI, you will be in an amazing situation. And the pathophysiology, they kind of don't go over. in cardio. They kind of talk about it, but they kind of don't. So then you're not too sure if you want to watch the videos in Boards and Beyond. No, that will be on the exam, even if they didn't even talk about it. So 100%, that's what I did. Amboss too, if you want to do that. I know Yo did Amboss, and I can post an example of some of the note cards that I have for each section because, man, I like wrote different colors on there, and I was never a note card person. I guess it's like an Anki, but in real life version. So you can look at it like that, but that's what I did. What do you guys think about the lectures?
Well, I am a person of habits. So for all of the terms, I would pre-read, I would attend lecture, and I would actually listen and take notes, and then I would post-read it. But pre-reading and post-read didn't take me very long, and I don't know. I like taking notes, but I have to be listening while taking notes. I can't just write notes for funsies. So I still did that, but honestly, they were still pretty useless. But I'm happy that for my pre-reading, I started doing it a day before, and I started doing it with a B&B. So then when I was listening in lecture, I would be like, oh yeah, I heard this in a video yesterday. And sometimes when I'm pre-reading the notes, I would already write stuff that I already knew. So that just kind of helped solidify what I was listening to and seeing and learning, before lecture and also during lecture. But the lectures sucked. CPRH lectures sucked the most. And I'm really bummed. That was my lowest score. And it's because I didn't do a lot of B&B for CPRH because I didn't know. I didn't really know about B&B because M&I, you didn't really need it yet. You're still doing the same thing you were doing from term 4. So I kind of skipped out on that. But then it was more helpful now. And I agree with Jonathan. They didn't really teach physio. I actually learned a lot of physio from UWorld these last 2 months. And it's actually kind of cool now that I get it. So thank you, UWorld. SGU didn't teach me anything about physio. Same thing with GI physio. I feel like SGU slacks on a lot. Never really learned it. Now I am, because UWorld is really emphasizing what's important about it. But yeah, so I still went to lecture. It wasn't super helpful, but I did it anyways because sometimes they would ask a random question. But really, for me, it was more enforcing the content. Like I'm just seeing it more times now. That's like the only reason I really did it. But yeah, B&B, great. Love Anki. Love Sketchy. Oki, amazing. And Pass Test was hard. There's like one question, and I actually saw a similar question in UWorld and on an NBME about Turner syndrome and hygroma. That's the only thing I took away from Pass Test. Yeah, so SG is going to give you UWorld, USMLE RX, and they're going to give you Pass Test. So you get 3. And then how you do it is really up to you. I started off doing UWorld and then I kind of stopped doing it. But if you can do at least 40 questions a day, you should be solid. But Jonathan will talk more about that later.
Yeah, so I sort of alluded to this before. Both Tam and Jonathan paid attention to lectures. Again, I was a person who every term I pre-read I didn't pre-read. I read the lectures at least 4 times. Like I made an Excel document and I highlighted how many times I did each lecture and everything. So basically like after M&I, because I did that for M&I, and you definitely should, because M&I is exactly like term 4, just extended. For the BSCE though, like literally 3 lectures in, I knew that this guy, like they weren't gonna do it for me. You're gonna find out that for the BSCEs, you're gonna basically have one professor. I'm not throwing any professor under the bus. I don't believe in doing that right now. But you're gonna have like one guy basically teaching you everything, like for the entire semester, like on random like organ systems, and you're just sitting there like, why are you teaching everything? There are other professors here and there. Thanks, Jonathan. At least you do it. But there are other professors here and there, but he's pretty much, and he just his teaching style wasn't doing it for me. I didn't understand what was going on. He tried really hard, and you could tell he was passionate in trying to teach us, but it just was not there for me. It wasn't making any connections, and the lecture slides are pretty bare too. Like, I just felt like I didn't know what was really going on. So I learned then and there, like, I can't do this. Like, this is not going to help me study, paying attention to, it's a waste of 2 hours for me to pay attention. So like I said before, I did the RX quizzes. I literally treated it like a learning tool. Like, I didn't use it to test my knowledge. I used it to, well, technically I did, but like, I would like go through each question. It's already set to tutor mode, which is basically when you answer the question and you click submit, it gives you an explanation if you got it wrong or right anyway. And I learned through that. And then I went to B&B if I like didn't understand something, or if I needed more help with something. And that's how I learned AMBOSS. If like, you know, I just wanted a refresher on like, what diagnostic tests would we use for this disease? Or like, what's the main like thing that we would see like clinical features wise. So that's sort of how I went through it. So again, like, I didn't look over a single lecture after M&I, the first exam, for BSEs basically. So, and I still did pretty well. So again, when you start going to lectures and you start to realize this might not do it for me, you know, try and fix and figure it out early ahead of time instead of putting yourself, like, the whole point of Part 5 is really adapting and trying to change your study style to help you understand everything for the exams. And were there lecture questions on the exams? Yes, but again, like anyone will tell you, it was like 5. Like, there were 5 things on the exams. I was like, I'm gonna have to take a guess because I knew it was in the lecture slides, but I didn't look it over. Did it impact my score by much? No. So again, whatever helps you understand everything is really like the best way to go about it. Also, someone did ask me, and I don't want to forget to make a comment about it. So for the BSCEs, basically, for the BSCEs, they give you this document. Jonathan and Tam know what document I'm talking about. And they're like, it's like the STEP document that tells you everything that's on STEP. And they're like, oh yeah, for BSCE 1, which is CPRH, you need to know all of cardiorenal, pulmonary and hematology. And then on top of that, we can ask you random questions on genetics and this and blah, blah. And they expect this document to help you like guide your studying. I spent like, I think this is why I didn't do as high on CPRH. I spent like 2 weeks trying to learn all of biochemistry because that document told me that we needed to know biochemistry for this exam and this and genetics and this and that. And it didn't even end up being on our exam. So again, like, it's a struggle because I followed that document for the first exam and then it was a waste of time. If you do the quizzes and you follow the topics from the quizzes, like make a running note of, oh, they tested on HCOM, right? On this question. Okay, let me review HCOM either like through AMBOSS or through whatever resource you do, Boards and Beyond, all of that. Oh, they tested on the physiology of this. Okay, let me go review this. Like, instead of following that document, I promise you, you're going to do much better than trying to follow that document. And I'll post the version of the document or we'll share it so you guys can see. But again, do not recommend following it. All the advisors will tell you to. It didn't prove helpful for me. And I see a lot of questions in the chat. I don't know if it looks like Tam's answering them. So yeah, right now, that's all I really have to say.
Yeah, it definitely seemed like to me that, you know, everything is extremely cumulative once you get past MNI, and they really try to touch on in lectures less than 40% of what's on the exams. But what I really want to focus on, I'm going to go through UWorld, talk about how it's important as far as step 1, but I really want to emphasize again, about a third of our class did not make it through term 5/BSFCR. So what I really want to like home in on is, yeah, do UWorld, but do not let that take over studying for term 5. Term 5 is the most important thing you can focus on because you do not want to redo it. And it's just a beast in its own. It will also help you in the long run to study for the step 1. So it's kind of a catch. So just really focus on the modules that you have to do. And then as far as UWorld, you know, we're going to talk about that the next slide, I believe. Yeah. So you do get access to it after M&I. My recommendation, which is something I did not do, so I'm going to really point that out, that I regret not doing it, is doing 40 questions a day. And we're going to go over in like a couple slides quickly how to set up UWorld, but I will say do 40 questions a day, start with one system at a time. You can do the same system that you're talking about at SGU. I'm telling you right now, though, it's not going to help you for the exam. SGU likes to test on like different stuff, I guess. Don't know why. Again, I want to point out that on UWorld it's extremely difficult. Some questions are super straightforward, like psych for me is just a piece of cake. Other questions for me, like genetics, I guarantee you I'll miss like 70% of the questions on because I don't know it very well. It's okay to get 30% or 40% questions right per section, per block. It's perfectly okay. It's learning. The whole goal is once you're done with the first pass, you know majority of the content on UWorld. And then we're going to talk about that. Is there anything you all want to add before we go through like how to do UWorld?
No, that's about it. Yeah, I just want to talk about how you go through UWorld. So yeah, actually, that's all.
Yeah. So here's the main screen for UWorld. Once you get the access to it, you're going to see step 1 QBank. You're going to see SUP 1 self-assessment form 1 and 2. I've already done 1. But for some reason, once you do it, you get 2 weeks of access to it, and then it gets like deleted unless you pay money, which I was not about to do. So I said goodbye. So once you launch step 1 QBank, don't activate the forms. Leave that to say activate until you're ready to take those. Those are like full lengths. They're not really full length. They're like half length USMLE equivalents. They're kind of like NBMEs. NBMEs are practice exams for the step 1. UWorld has their own practice exams for the step 1. But really you want to focus on step 1 QBank. And when you click launch, you get to the next screen, which is this. And well, really you're going to see the welcome, but I kind of just went straight to create tests. You on the left side, you see welcome, create test, previous test performance, blah, 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 blah. In create test is what you're going to see. You're going to leave tutor mode on according to the top. I did timed off. You don't really need to do timed in the very beginning. There are about 3,670 questions, as you can see next to all. I had about 476 questions left and 1,000 incorrect by the time I made this video. And what I did was I did unused subjects, and then I went to a specific system. I really want to point out though, see it incorrect, it says 1,300. I wouldn't really necessarily recommend waiting until you have 1,300, but you should be redoing incorrects, not immediately after doing it, but waiting like a couple weeks or after you do another system and going back and doing the incorrects for that specific system. You want to kind of get it down as you're going through it. Unused, I did subjects. I selected all the subjects. So that top left box next to subjects, I selected that. And then if you go to the next slide for me, Tam, as far as systems go, these are all the systems. A lot of them say 0 because I've already done all the questions in those systems. You're going to want to do one at a time, personally, is what I'd highly recommend. So I started with cardio. Don't start with cardio. That really was depressing. Maybe start with something easier like hematology or infectious disease or renal or something like that. Cardio was really difficult on UWorld. Like it was insane. I was blown away. But coming out of it on NBME, I did really well on cardio for that section because I did all the questions and I did all the incorrects for that section. So that's really how you're going to want to do it. On the bottom left, you see max allowed per block. You can put no more in than 40. I'd recommend doing 40. And again, when you're in term 5, I would recommend doing no more than 40 questions per day. And those 40 questions per day, try not to take you more than like 2 hours max. And that's like pushing it. I would say like an hour and a half. You want to do it. You want to understand why you got the question right or wrong. There's a big explanation. You want to understand the other answer choices as well. The more I'm doing NBME practice exams, I realize they're asking me questions on the other answer choices I didn't bother learning. And I just simply bother to learn whether the question is right or wrong for that UWorld question. So very important to understand why the other answer choices were not correct. Don't do more than 40 a day. I'm not kidding. You're not going to do well on term 5 unless you're like gung-ho, you're amazing. You know, you can wake up at 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, do 2 UWorld blocks, study for lectures, do the boards and beyond, and do the questions, then you are a beast. There's a few people in my class that 100% could do that, then you're a bomb. But if not, I would stick to 40. And if you have to pause on that entirely, that's totally okay too. Term 5 is extremely difficult. There's something else I wanted to add. I personally didn't do any of the UWorld. I take that back. I did like 500 questions before. I would shoot for finishing one pass by the end of term 5. That is a lot in itself. That's a huge accomplishment if you can do that, because you will be in an amazing spot when you finish term 5, not just for the BSFCR, but for step 1 in general. And if you guys have questions about UWorld, USMLE-RX, while you're in the term, feel free to like DM me. I'll probably be in clinicals. God, I hope I'm in clinicals by then. Step 1 is crazy, but yeah. Tam, you guys have anything to add?
I do recommend the 40 every day. By the time we finished term 5, I think I only finished 23% of UWorld. Now I'm completely done. I actually finished a week and a half ago, something. But that's because I have dedicated to do 120 to 160 every day. And that's where most of my step studying is. And it's been really, really awesome, actually. I did it somewhat differently than Jonathan. Instead of picking like one system, sometimes I would randomize it. So I'd pick like one subject. I would be like, oh, let's do path. And then I would do all of it, see what happens. I don't know if that works for everybody. It was kind of stressful, but yeah, there's multiple ways that you can use UWorld. They're both great, both work. I agree with Jonathan. If you can get one pass just by doing 40 every day, that would be really awesome, because then when you get to dedicated, you can just start doing timed randomized blocks and then working on NBMEs, and that would be amazing. Because I think that was most stressful for me is I only finished 23%, and we have to take it soon-ish. But yeah, I wish I did more UWorld. Also, while you're doing UWorld during term 5, I would do the systems that you're doing. So for MNI, I did UWorld during MNI. I would do all of the neuro, brain tumors and stuff like that. So I would do those questions, and then I would move on for like rheumatology. That's where you're gonna have muscle and skin. So I would do those. Yeah, it makes it a little bit easier because you're not really doing questions on things you haven't done yet, but you're still kind of like keeping up with the term. But yeah, that's about it. Jonathan hit every single point.
So, in terms of my advice, they're saying do 40 questions a day. I recommend doing how many you can, just because I know for me, when BSc 1 started, like I had this such elaborate plan of doing like 40 questions of UWorld a day, doing all the quizzes, this, that, and like, after a while you get behind because it's a lot and you only have so many hours in the day, and you have to care about your mental health a lot. Like CPRH really brought me down. And then after that, I was like, I can't continue to be down. Like that's going to definitely bring my scores down. So I had to sort of maneuver my studying, and I stopped doing UWorld. So I regret completely stopping. So if you do have the time to do 40 a day, go for it. But if you find that UWorld is keeping you back from doing the RX quizzes and from doing the whatever other resource you guys want to use, like Boards and Beyond and that, for supplementing the BSCEs, don't do 40 a day of UWorld. Do how much you can that day. If you can only do 5 UWorld questions that day, only do 5. Just starting UWorld though and doing a little bit each day though is something that I wish I actually like kept to, just even doing a little bit, just because I started dedicated with basically having to do all of UWorld. Like I'm still not done with UWorld, and I'm not taking steps till I finish UWorld. That's just something I made myself promise. So it's sort of like it did hold me back a bit because of that. But again, if you can't do 40 a day, don't neglect the quizzes and BMB and all your other resources. Don't neglect term 5 for UWorld, because you still need to pass term 5 to even take step. And the whole point of UWorld is to prep for step. So again, if you make a schedule and you see that 40 questions a day is going to take you like a good majority of your day, because they are long, they're exhausting, and you want to learn when you're doing these. These aren't to test your, it's to test your knowledge, but it's a learning tool. So if you can only do 10 a day, then do 10 a day, but at least you're doing something. So by when you start dedicated, you don't have that much left over. That's sort of the comment I want to make about UWorld. Do it, but if it's going to become too exhausting, only do 5 a day or 10 or whatever's the comfortable limit for you. Another comment I want to make, again, I'm all for mental health and all of that. The scores that you get at the end, don't let them bring you down. I know a lot of people who stopped even looking at the RX quizzes or UWorld, like stopped doing it just because they saw they got like a 40%. Again, it's your first time doing these questions. They're not meant to be easy. And another thing is too, again, it's a learning tool. It's not really there to quiz like your actual, you're learning through these questions. When you do your incorrects or when you do them again a second time, that's when you want to start being concerned about the percentage. So don't let the percentage bring you down. I still have that issue where if I get something low, I'm like, wow, like, why don't I know this by now? And it can ruin my entire day. So I try really hard not to, and I don't want anyone here to be disappointed. So again, use these as a learning tool. Do UWorld, but if it's gonna become too much, only do a little bit. At least you'll be in a better spot than just leaving all of UWorld for the beginning of dedicated. The 6 weeks, like everyone wants you to take first step, is not enough to do all of UWorld. I'm gonna tell you that right now.
Yeah, definitely. I think something I want to add too is the RX quizzes, they're assigning you. So for 1 week, let's just say, I don't know, I love endo. So they give you endo for the first week. And they'll probably talk about 40% of the systems in endo, and they'll leave out most of the information, like really key enzymes they're going to ask you on the exam. So you're going to have to watch Boards and Beyond. When you do the USMLE ARCS quizzes, I recommend doing them on Friday and Saturday because by then you would have finished all the Boards and Beyond videos, I hope, for that section. You would go do the quizzes and you'd score like 50, 60%. That's okay. You do the questions on there and you see why you got them wrong. I would recommend obviously doing one at a time. You go and do Boards and Beyond, you search, literally just search one word, like one of the keywords from the question stem, and it will pop up with a video. Obviously, sometimes it'll pop up with like 3 or 4 videos. You have to look for the exact video that talks about it, but it has a great search tool on Boards and Beyond. We're able to watch that video and skip to that section and we'll explain to you perfectly that entire subject. Personally, I'd recommend just you're watching the whole video all over again so you get like a better foundation, and that helps a lot. But seriously, just if you're starting to not do well in UWorld, just stop it. It's not, or not do bad in UWorld, but if you're starting to not do well in term 5, just stop UWorld. It's not worth it. You really want to pass because you really don't want to have to retake, and that's really, really important. I don't know if there's any more slides. Oh, yes, the most important, the cream of the crop, the BSFCR. Okay, y'all, this test is so funny. They started it the term before us. It is basically, if I had to explain it, it's like an exam of all experimental questions. And it's like 140 something questions of just experimental questions. Like that's literally what it is. I personally don't think it correlates to the USMLE Step 1. I've taken multiple NBME exams. I've taken a URL full-length exam. There's not a lot of correlation between this BSFCR and that, but I will tell you, they give you a week after term 5. And at this point, you will not have your final BSCE exam that you just have completed. You will not have your OSCE scores. And OSCE actually counts for a lot for some reason at the end of term 5. You won't have any of those scores in walking into BSFCR. So if you're like 74, 75, and you're like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to pass, they're going to make you take BSFCR, even if you didn't even pass the last couple exams. So you're walking into that exam not even sure for some people. But what I will say is they give you a week to study for BSFCR. Personally, people will tell you different things. There's other groups that are going to tell you to look at IMCQs. There's other groups that are going to tell you to just look at the lectures from term 1, term 2, blah, 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 blah. This exam is impossible to study for. It is super, super specific. It is super, super random. The average for our class was like a 56%. I scored around average, and after curve, obviously you pass. Most people, I guess I should say, pass, about 2/3 passed. I personally don't believe it's possible to study for. I spent the entire week before BSFCR not studying. because I knew it wasn't. I listened to the upper termers and they were like, oh, it's impossible to study for. It's really unfortunate though, because even if I didn't pass the SFCR, I wouldn't even know what to study to like take it again to pass it. Luckily, I got lucky, I guess. What I would recommend though is when you're taking the BSFCR, is there's obviously 50% of the answer choices you can eliminate very easily. It's really differentiating maybe 2 answer choices, and some I had no idea. So if you have I really believe if you have a good term 5 foundation, it's enough to pass BSFCR, even though a lot of the content was from year 1 and was really specific. BSFCR is its own animal. It's not going to tell you how you do on step 1. SGU, I think, really does it to kind of stop a lot of people from entering dedicated and filling up the clinical sites too quickly. I can't confirm that, but that's one of the reasons why I really wanted to keep this meeting low key, because the BSFCR is just one of those exams you just have to take and just hope for the best. Tam, you have anything to add about that?
Well, I actually tried to study for this. I remember I would hop on these silent Zoom studies, and in the chats it'd be like, fun fact or pop quiz, what is this? And that kind of helped, because that was like, but it was also helpful for step 2 because it's just like material that I need to know anyways. I also tried to go through first aid. I did look at some term 1 and term 2 lecture notes that I took, like lysosomal storage diseases and glycogen storage diseases. I remember they harped on those a lot, but I think there was only like 2 questions. So not really sure how much that helped. I mean, I know it now for sure for UWorld and stuff, but yeah, I also tried to do some like biochem sketchy. Just because I remember that was really big in term 1 and term 2, and there was a decent amount of old biochem questions on BSFCR. I definitely passed. I did decent. I didn't really look at it though. I mean, when I saw that passing grade, I was like, bye-bye, never looking at this again. But yeah, I agree. It was really random. There's a lot of random questions on there. And this was also when I started to do like a lot of the, this is where I finished catching up on Anki. And that was, I would say, way more helpful. I would say there was more year 1 material, I think, than year 2. I felt like it was a lot of term 1, term 2, like random, small things. I don't know. What do you think, Jonathan and you? I feel like it was more term 1.
So, well, in regards to that, so I felt like it was dispersed between year 1 and year 2, but I felt like the year 1 questions were either written poorly or they were written in a way to have you like debate like what they were talking about. It wasn't high yield year 1 info. It was stuff that like you just wouldn't expect them to ask you, or it wasn't even like, because I memorized most of the lecture in year 1 and year 2, and I would be like, well, I know what you're asking me, but none of these answer choices are like even ringing a bell in my head for that topic, so it was very weird for me the year 1. I felt like the year 2 questions were a little bit more straightforward. Like it was more like, do you know the pathology or not? Do you know what's associated or not? Year 1 was like, yeah, like, do you remember this one little thing that we asked you in this lecture in like the little hand corner, like how you feel when you're reading a textbook and then they have that image in the corner. Yeah, that's what those questions felt like. So yeah, in terms of BSFCR, I keep saying it the other way, I don't know why, but it was one of my best exams in SGU, but I can't tell you why. Like, I wish I could give you guys like a perfect study plan for this. Like, what I ended up doing was I was terrified for this exam, so I redid some of the RX quizzes on subjects that I wasn't secure about, because I was like, okay, like, let me make sure that I know that for this exam. Were any of those like quizzes, like questions on it, were anything like similarly worded about like that on it? No. Like, I honestly, for some of them, this is probably not the best advice, but I would read it, I look at the answer choices, I'd be like, that's a weird sounding answer choice. That's probably what SGU wants me to click. Like, that's what I did. Or I'd be like, you know what? That sounds like something that that professor would have parked on because he probably caught this. Okay, I'm gonna choose that. You know, like for the ones that I was stuck on. Do I recommend doing that? I don't know. I mean, it worked for me, but I don't know if it would work for you. It really depends. It just BSFCR. I think the best thing about this exam solely is just because if you do end up not passing it, it doesn't go into your transcript. It doesn't affect your GPA. It doesn't like it doesn't get reported anywhere that you didn't pass it. Like it's not gonna go on what's that, my campus or the self-service thing. Like it's not going to go on that. It's going to say that you didn't pass it until you pass it, pretty much. So then it gets completely removed. So no one sees that you failed it. I know some people are worried about that. It doesn't affect your GPA or score or anything like that. It's literally sort of what Jonathan was saying before. Again, like we feel like it's just there to make not everyone be able to take step by their recommended deadline. Because everyone who's retaking it is retaking it in 5 days, which as you can see, our term ended like in May. So that's a long time, you know? So like, just saying, we felt like that's what I think it is. I just don't think they want everyone taking step by the recommended deadline, which is only recommended, by the way. So if you feel like you need more time when they give you that, take step, take it, because I am, so it's whatever. But yeah, BSCFR, you could study for it, you could do IMCQs, you could do whatever you want for it. There are people who just party. I'm gonna be honest, like when I was doing the quizzes and I went on Instagram and I saw people on the island just partying, and I messaged one of my friends like, hey, like, are you studying this? She's like, no. Like, let's be honest, what can you learn within 5 days for this exam that you haven't learned during this term that like to prep you for it? I was like, you're right, but I'm an anxious person, so I still study it every day. Did it help me? Who knows? I don't know. But I wish I had better advice. My only advice is if it looks a little weird of an answer choice, it probably might be the answer choice, because SGU really took words that I knew and like contorted them in like the most weird English languagey way. Like it felt like more like an English exam. That's what I'm gonna say, but just not really a medical exam.
Yeah, completely agree. It's an interesting term. Really want to point out you all need to take breaks though. It's not something that you should sacrifice your mental health for. It's difficult. It gets really difficult. There's a lot of content to review, and you review and you're like, oh man, I literally just learned this last week. I forgot it. Now I have to watch the videos, do the note cards again for it. And then you're realizing at the same time you're not doing New World or doing RX quizzes. It can definitely hit you hard. As far as how many times you're allowed to take BSFCR, I don't think there's a limit. They haven't really told us. I'm sure there's probably like an internal limit. They only tell students that have probably not passed it a certain amount of times, but from us that we haven't. But anyway, yeah. So take breaks for sure. I'll give you a typical day in my schedule. I honestly am lazy. I woke up at 10 o'clock in the morning. I don't really care. Our lectures weren't until 3:30, I think. So I spent the morning prepping for those lectures, watching Boards and Beyond. There's probably minimum 2-3 hours worth of Boards and Beyond videos, and that's like minimum for each block. So I would watch those for that specific section.
Jonathan, if you're still there, we can't hear you anymore. I don't know.
Want to put yourself in a position where not only you're forgetting the information, but you're slacking on dedicated. It's just not worth it. Obviously take time off, but don't take too much time off. I don't know where I was going with that. Tam, Yo, do you have anything else to add?
I can talk about my typical day. So I am 2 hours ahead. So lectures for me were at 1:30. I would wake up pretty early. So what I think small group was at 9 or 8 for a little bit there. So I would do that. And I would do Anki during small group because the BSFCR small group are very, you're kind of just like collaborating on stuff. Yeah, so many small groups. Also the regular small groups during term 5 were all patient interactions. So every once in a while when I didn't have to like have a role, I would just do Anki during my small groups. It was great. Me and my small group actually had Anki races, like who got the most in this time. I usually won, except one time I didn't. And then after that, hold on, sorry, the garage is closing in my house. I know, I'm sad that you guys won't be able to do Anki. It really makes me sad because it was honestly really awesome. And then after that, after small group and my Anki, I would I don't know. I don't really remember what I did because I used to pre-read and watch videos before lecture, but then I did that before. So I would like catch up on videos like on B&B that I didn't quite get to yet. I would do that from small group to lecture. And then I would go to lecture, I'd take notes, and then after lecture I would post read, and then I would walk for 45 minutes, and then I would go work out. And then after that, I would start my pre-reading stuff for the day before. And then if I could, I would do questions. That was kind of my typical day. It was nice because I was ahead by 2 hours, so I felt like I had more time to do stuff, but it was early. That was like my day. If anyone has any questions, let me know.
Yeah, for me, I literally woke up. I had I believe I don't even remember term 5. Like, it's much of a blur it is after doing all U World every day for past like month and a half or however long we've been done. But I'm pretty sure I was in the 8 a.m. lectures, but I thought the lectures would be helpful. So for me, when I wake up, I'm a little bit more awake compared to having to listen to them at like 3:30 or whatever. So again, if you guys have it at that time, probably not going to be like most helpful, I'm going to say, but like I would just wake up. Again, this is for BSCEs onwards, not for M&I. M&I did what I always did. You know, I had kept an Excel doc. I would just go through each lecture at least 4 times for an exam, and pretty much that solidified me. But for the BSCEs, like I would wake up and I would start my what's it called, the RX quizzes, and I would just go through that for like the entire like day. Like I would do an RX, like let's say we get a question, I'd answer the question. If I got it wrong, you know, I'd read the explanation. If I still didn't really get what the explanation was going for, if I was like, okay, I don't really remember this, I go to Boards and Beyond, find the video. If Boards and Beyond didn't have the video, I go to YouTube. But Boards and Beyond not having the video is very, very unlikely. But again, there were some topics where I was like, okay, even after Boards and Beyond, I was like, I don't really understand it. YouTube is one of my favorite resources. It's free, and honestly, you can find most of anything on YouTube. Like Dirty Medicine is a good one I listen to. Medic Pasos Profesionalos. I'm probably murdering that. I'm so sorry. Was also a good one. He had a lot of videos, so I sort of use that to supplement. And Boss 2 was good for just like if you wanted to just read about it, not really pay attention to a video. Again, I sort of implemented whatever worked. But I would do that for each question in a way if I didn't understand it. If I got a question right and afterwards I was like, yeah, I know that. Obviously, I wouldn't go that much in depth about looking at every resource ever. But if I then got a question that was testing that same topic wrong later, then I go back. And so it's sort of like you sort of have to mix and match. And then, yeah, that's sort of like what I did every day, pretty much. You know, but I'm also keen on mental health and physical health and all that. So, you know, I take breaks and everything. That's pretty much all I did. Other than small groups, I would sit there and try to learn the most from small group, try to be super participatory, because that's just how I was. Yeah, so BSCFR is the cumulative 2-year exam. So I know you guys we had a BSCE in term 2. They call that now the BSCFR. The BSCEs that we keep talking about are the 3 last modular exams. The reason why we call them BSCE is the school tells you they're not BSCEs, but they are BSCEs. They're basically cumulative exams for those systems. So think about it, there's usually 4 systems on one exam. So CPRH, yeah, there you go, from what Sam said. So cardio, pulmonary, renal, hematology, you're basically being tested on everything from the past 2 years on that exam for those topics. Then the next exam, which was gastro, obstetrics, endocrine, and reproductive, again, past 2 years, that exam. And then I forget what the last one is. DNPR, derm, neuro, don't know what the P or R stands for, but pretty much like, again, you're going to be tested on past 2 years for that. And then the BSCFR is everything. Oh, psychiatry and rheumatology. Literally like everything. So no, only one topic. It's going to be just, they can throw whatever they want on that. But yeah, I just pretty much did the RX quizzes, went to small group, and just, you know, like lived my life after that. I don't really know, but that's it. Unless anyone has any questions, I may have to stop this recording just because I want to share the syllabus and that document that they give you that tells you, oh yeah, this is what's on the exam, so you can see it. But again, that's just for you guys to sort of have it, because I know you guys haven't gotten your stuff yet, and I'm pretty sure you guys start the term in 15 days. So I thought maybe seeing it ahead of time might ease some nerves for some of you.